This is episode 109 of Stand Up, and I cannot tell you that it's going to be a great opening because I spent 2 hours talking to a longtime listener and subscriber named Zach Lewis, who lives out in St. Louis. And this is the guy who bought me the bottle of whiskey after hearing that I've been drinking cheap Evan Williams. And so we talked for a couple hours, and the guy is just so cool. We had such a great conversation. But now it's late. And I've been drinking, and I just can't promise that it's going to be the greatest opening. But the show is great. I can tell you on the show today, I've got John Donvan of Intelligence Squared Debates previewing his upcoming debate. And I've got his wife, who is a physician, to talk about HydroxyChlorine and why the president's gone mad. I have also got two dreamers, two folks who are from Mexico and Chile who are engaged and have a fascinating story to tell. And I'm very excited about all of the guests on today's show. But this part where I open, I can't promise that it's going to be anything great because it's late. I've been drinking whiskey with Zach, and I don't know how much I have to put into it. So here we go. It's time to stand up with me right now. Are you ready to roll, Tim? Let's do this. Okay, so welcome to episode 109. I have a lot of things on my mind and a lot to say. Today was a difficult day for a number of reasons, but it's just a kind of a perfect storm of shit that happened, and some of it's boring, and I don't even want to share with you because it's a little bit personal about work-related stuff, an opportunity that I had that it's just not proving what I thought it was going to be, and then also found out that camp has been canceled for my daughters. And I think that a lot of you out there listening right now that have kids or that had summer plans have realized summer is looking like it's going to be canceled. Whether your kids were going to a sports camp or they're in a league or you're planning this or that vacation, I think now is the time period where we are realizing that our summer plans are being canceled. And I think the most brutal thing about this, obviously outside of the obvious loss of life and wealth, is the uncertainty and the inability to plan for a few months ahead, a few weeks ahead. My wife said today that she really needs something to look forward to, and that really resonated with me, and I'm sure with you as well. And so as you see your summer start to get canceled, and having to replan things and reprioritize for your kids and try to keep them active and busy and not just addicted to screens, you find a new sense of adversity about what it's going to be over the next couple of months. Summer, canceled, sucks. My daughters go to the YWC or YMCA camp in Lake George, and they love it. My daughter's gone twice. My older one, my younger one went for the first time last year, and it was an amazing experience for them. 2 weeks without screens and being in nature and learning new skills and making new friends. Gone. Yet another memory stolen. Your kids might not be going to Zach, who I mentioned earlier. His kid's is an elite soccer player and was, on the Olympic development program and was going all over the country for tournaments. Gone. Everything is gone. All of your plans. That's tough. Tough. And it's challenging. And what are we going to do? I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to help each other through it. I'm going to help you through it. You're going to help me through it. That's what this show is about. Learning new things, staying connected, and feeling like you're not alone. And as I'm just rambling here at the top of the show, I just have to say it's been a wild 6 months for me. And getting to meet you and talk to you on a personal one-on-one basis has been by far the best thing. I've made so many new friends because of this show, and I can't tell you what it means to me and hopefully what it means to you as well. If we haven't connected yet, I'd love to. Everybody I talk to blows my mind. Zach and I were talking, and he tells me that he takes the dogs for the walk every morning. The walk? What the hell is wrong with me? Yeah, he takes the dog for a walk every morning and listens to the show. And a lot of people apparently are doing that now that the show is daily. And I feel like I want to give you something more here at the top, something more profound, something more related to the news. And so I'm going to keep on experimenting and trying to figure that out. But he was telling me that he started at the end of our conversation, like 2 hours, to say that he was honored in a way that we had this conversation. And I think sometimes people think, oh, this is, Pete, I'm a subscriber to the show. Pete's doing me a favor and reaching out to me, and maybe this is the last time I get to talk to him. And not the case. Not the case. It's not an honor to talk to me. It's most likely a letdown, to be honest with you. But it is an honor, honestly, for me to talk to you. I learned so much from you. From the people who listen to the show have so much to offer me. You have such a different life experience than me, no matter who you are. And you have so much to share with me. It's an honor for me to be able to do the show now daily. It's an honor for me that you subscribe to this show. That's where the honor is. Thank you for joining me whenever you do. Thank you for enjoying this journey with me and learning from the guests who I get to have on this show. And that's it. That's all I wanted to say. So, Zach Lewis, thank you for our talk. Thank you for that bottle of whiskey that you bought me. And thank you to all of you who I've made a connection with. So many people have been editing their pledges, it's called, because Patreon, which is the subscriber service that I use, allows you, obviously, you can pay whatever you want. I have these different tiers, they're called, but so many people have edited their pledges up. You pay $5, now you pay 10. You pay 10, now you pay 25. 25, now you pay 50. And so many people have reached out to me, and I feel overwhelmed. I can't keep up. And that is tough for me. I feel very insecure that I haven't gotten back to some of you who have emailed me or sent me messages in any different number of apps, especially on Patreon or email. And I will try to get back to you, but people have said profoundly thoughtful things about how they appreciate what I'm doing here now and have started to pay more for their subscriptions. And it's just everybody who's, what I'm trying to say is everybody who is subscribing. Sorry, this whiskey is getting to me. Speak well. Michter's midnight when I'm recording this. But every single person who has subscribed means so much to me. But those of you who are now upgrading or editing your pledge up, it's, I don't know how to say how lucky I feel to have you listening, but I feel lucky. I feel fortunate to be able to be connected with you. And I look forward to building this community and connecting you with each other and supporting each other. Crazy time in the world, and we're living it together. And today's show has awesome guests, and so let's get to it. I'm done rambling about. How long has it been? Oh, my goodness, 8 minutes. Are you still listening? Joining me today are two dreamers. They are engaged, and they are special, and they're... I couldn't stop thinking about this interview after I did it with them and after meeting them. And I did it on Zoom, and I'll try to put it up on YouTube so you can see them. But beautiful people, both of them, very attractive people. And Tania is from Mexico, and Alejandro is from Chile. And they came here when they were little kids. And they have both made tremendous impact on their communities and their societies where they live. And I'm privileged to bring them to you and their experience. It is heartbreaking that we have not been able to have immigration reform in this country and to normalize these people and to allow them to work and get educated. They are major contributors to our society, and I'm very happy to introduce to you two of them and to talk about what the pandemic lays bare for undocumented people and those who are qualified dreamers under the DACA program. You think about your problems and your issues, whether they be with your finances, with your health, or with your relationships. And we all are struggling in different ways. We all have adversities to overcome, even Michael Jordan, apparently. But you think about these people and how they live in the shadows and how every day their concern is that they're going to be kicked out of the only country they know. And it's heart-wrenching. And so now I bring to you these two very special people that have made a major impact on their community and their society. Here now, my conversation with Alejandro Fuentes Mina and Tania Cherez, right now on Stand Up. All right, so here they are, Tania and Alejandro. So happy to have you guys joining Stand Up with Pete Dominic and to get your story out there. I feel like more than anything else, Tania, that is really your effort, is to constantly tell your story, which is representative of so many other both DACA recipients and undocumented Americans. Is that really the goal, to tell this story of yours that you and so many others are living?
Absolutely. We want to make sure the country really recognizes us as their neighbors, the people that are just around. We're here and we're here to stay.
Well, I hope that's the truth. But as you both say, you may not be. I mean, given the situation that you're in, Alejandro, you've come out very publicly and talked about your status, which is both of you have, and that's dangerous for both of you. Are you here to stay? Do you truly believe that, given this administration, or do you fear every day that you'll be sent out of this country? I almost said sent home. This is your home, Alejandro.
I think we all have that fear innately to a certain degree. But the reason why we're so public is because we feel that by being public, that guarantees our safety. The more that people know about us, the more that if either of us were in deportation hearings, people would come up and step up, call their senators and be all like, really? You're going to let go of Alejandro and Tania, that beautiful couple who's just trying to live their lives, that a teacher who's out serving in an underserved community? That's who you're going to let go of. And I think the ridiculousness and the support is what guarantees our safety.
Well, you mentioned that beautiful couple, and I would say that that's maybe your 10th or 11th best quality, but you guys are really good looking people. That must help.
I mean, it definitely doesn't hurt.
Although the beard that you're growing, I don't think is helping your cause. Only more things to quote fear, Alejandro. What are you thinking?
I think the reason why I'm growing out my beard is actually every year for my students, I say that if they do well on a certain test, on the standardized test that they have to do, then they get to shave off my beard. Now, with virtual learning, that's not necessarily going to happen, but I'm still putting like some sort of thing out there, and they're going to shave off my beard if they meet the goal. But outside of that, I would say that I'm still okay looking like this, looking like a bearded brown man. And the reason why I am is because I feel like we need to get rid of these stigmas that people have based off of pure appearances. And so I think the fact that I am an educator and that I do grow this beard and I'm still an upstanding citizen, no matter what society says about me, hopefully changes the narrative for a few.
What a great answer. I was not expecting that. But as an incentive for your own kids to learn, they get to shave that beard. But in the end, it's up to your fiance, Tania, as to how long.
Absolutely.
Right?
But
Yes.
well, she has to keep it corralled. She's not like, that's too much
Corralled.
right now. You need to do something.
Yes, it gets a little crazy.
Corralled as a reference to facial hair is fantastic. Tania, I want you to both now tell just your origin story, if you can. When you came to the United States, from where and how old were you?
Absolutely. I was born in Chihuahua, Mexico, in Nuevo Casas Grandes, in nearby towns. And that's about 4 hours below the border. And I was 5 when my family decided that, poverty and violence in Mexico was getting way too out of hand. And so it was about time to make a decision for the improvement of our economic standing and how our family was going to function. And so they told me we were going to Disneyland. They were wrong. We actually ended up in Phoenix, Arizona, which is not Disneyland.
No, it is not.
Not at all.
No. Only Disneyland is Disneyland. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. And I was raised in Phoenix, Arizona from ages 5 to 18. I definitely consider myself a person that has been in this country for as long as I can remember. I haven't been back to Mexico in a very long time. And the violence there is really out of hand with the cartels. So it would be really hard for me to go back.
Not only, though, Phoenix, specifically Maricopa County, where this monster, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, was in charge for a really long time. I mean, did your parents understand how difficult that county was going to be for you to live in? Or was it not that way when you got there? I mean, how much was this awful person, how much did he change the county and enforce these crazy laws against folks like you and your family?
I was so young when we first got there that I didn't know much about politics. The first time that I started paying attention to politics was I was in middle school when we started doing a day without a Mexican, we called it back then. And I don't remember what year this was, but we would have a day without a Mexican. I think it was on May Day, where all of the people who identified as Mexican or Mexican American went to downtown Phoenix and just protested and said, we're not going to be in your restaurants today. We're not going to be, cleaning your homes. We're not going to be at your construction sites. How does it feel? And that was the first time I started paying attention to what was happening. But, Sheriff Arpaio definitely terrorized our communities. He changed the entire way that we functioned. I mean, my family and I, whenever we would go out anywhere, we would have to keep constant tabs on what we were hearing from our friends. Was there a raid on this street corner? Like, should we take the long way home? And it was just hard thinking about the fact that anytime we went out into the world could be the last time that I would see my family.
Yeah. And I think also that psychological effect that it took on, like, whether or not you all even spoke Spanish. I think you should talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. My mom refused to talk in Spanish anytime we were out in public. And it was just sort of this internalized feeling of we are not welcome here. So we would go to the grocery store and I would be like, yes, vamos a agarrar leche. We're going to get some milk. And she would be like, shh, like, let's not talk about anything in Spanish. And I'm like, this is the grocery store. Like, let me live my life. But no, that was our life.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to figure out my identity as a Mexicana and as an undocumented person.
Yeah, you mentioned the terror, and there's actually really good research and studies on what that aggregated fear and stress does to your body and to your life and to your psychology over time, day in and day out. But you also talk about, and you guys gave a joint TED Talk, which is great, and I highly recommend everybody watch it. It was really painful to hear you refer to the fact that growing up at some point you thought about yourself kind of the most pernicious stereotypes of Mexican people, that you were, quote, dirty. Talk to me about that.
Absolutely. I actually mentioned it in my monologue for the Modus Theater podcast that
I'll link to that medium, and to all of that in the show notes of this podcast, because it's so good for everybody to read and to hear. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was really hard for me to think of myself in any positive light, given that Sheriff Arpaio was always talking trash about us, and given that the news was always painting us as these horrible people just like invading the country, stealing jobs. And so, I came to believe that was true about myself too. And it's hard to undo that level of self-hatred.
I can't even begin to imagine what that must be like. But of course, and I want to get to Alejandro's story too, but of course, and I hate to fast forward through any of your life, but you eventually attended an Ivy League college. You went to the University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton School of Business, of course, where Donald Trump is so proud that he went. How did you get accepted there, and what are you doing now with that degree?
Yeah, I'm very thankful to my teachers in high school who, at the time we couldn't really Google how does an undocumented student get into college. This was way before DACA. This was way before we had all these resources on the internet. And so I had a team of educators who would help me figure out what was my possibility. And I remember my career counselor went to every single recruitment session for schools. And UPenn was the only school that said that, yes, they would accept undocumented students. And so I applied to Penn thinking that my backup plan would be to go back to Mexico. And thankfully I got in. Otherwise, maybe I'd be in Mexico right now. But right now I'm the National Outreach and Education Director for Modus Theater, working to uplift the stories of other undocumented people. And I'm actually starting my own nonprofit called Convivir Colorado that will support immigrant and refugee youth through a leadership program. Amazing.
You're an amazing human being. Let's talk to your fiance and get his story as well. Alejandro, you are, Tania's family is from Mexico. I'm going to say it like you, as opposed to hitting that X if I'm allowed to. But your family is from Chile. Is that right?
That is correct.
When did you come to the United States, and how?
Actually, the way that I came to the U.S. was interesting because my mom actually left me in Chile when I was 2 years old with my aunts and uncles. And the reason why she did was because her original plan was to come with her mom, but her mom passed away. And so her childcare plan was gone. So she came on her own and was essentially trying to like build up and start something up in the land of America, right? Like the land of opportunity. But when she got here, she realized that things were a little bit more difficult for an immigrant than she expected. And so she had trouble landing jobs to the point where she was no longer able to afford like my plane ticket in order to reunite myself with her. So at the age of when I was 4, the church actually pitched in and bought my flight to get me here as a surprise for Mother's Day. So I arrived on Mother's Day in 1995 to a very surprised mom who was like, oh my gosh, like, is that my kid? Yeah, I still like, I always tell people like I was surrounded by an entire congregation of people just like coming and being like, oh, is that little Alex? Is that little Alex? Es el hijo de Patty. That's him, right? And all of a sudden, like the crowd splits and I see just my mom and the sun like shines behind her. And like we both go and it's like a tender hug from like a child who had not seen his mom in like 2 years.
Wow. What a story. And where were you raised?
I was raised in San Diego, California, right. And actually did most of my, we moved around a lot, but the most consistent place that I had was a school called the Pro School UCSD, where I went from 6th to 12th grade. And that's actually where I went from being a clown as a kid. I like to tell jokes and I had like the physical comedy aspect about me.
Yeah.
And not caring about my grades at all, to actually putting 100% effort and graduating in good standing from that high school.
What changed? Why did you kind of mature and evolve and take school more seriously?
I ended up changing because I had a very impactful teacher named Ms. Kovacic. Ms. Kovacic saw me as that little clown, but saw my potential and was like, yo, Alejandro, like, why aren't you trying? Why aren't you doing the work? And right around middle school, I had already come to the cognition that being undocumented meant that as I grew older, no matter what I did, I wouldn't have these opportunities. So I had set that in my mind, and I told her, like, there's no point in me trying. I'm undocumented,
right? And
my mom is treated like crap. Like, sorry if we're not supposed to cuss.
You can say anything you want. That's crap isn't a cuss where I come from, but go ahead.
Yeah. But I was trying to censor myself. I'm like,
no, don't. Let's be real. And I mean, the idea that you thought that there was no promise for you, there was no future for you. That's something that a lot of undocumented people have to deal with every day. That even if they have all the promise and all the potential, all the intelligence, the work ethic, the grit, and so on, there's a ceiling in terms of jobs for folks like you.
Exactly. And essentially, Ms. Kovacic was all like, look, if you give your 100% effort, I promise you that you won't have to be paid less than like your parents are. I will get you to a college. One way or another, I make you that promise now. And so in like 7th or 8th grade, she made that promise to me, and it completely changed what I was willing to put forth.
One amazing teacher. You eventually, of course, yourself went to college, I think in the state of Washington, yeah? And now you are a middle school teacher yourself, no doubt, inspiring young people the way that she did you. What do you teach?
I teach 6th grade math. So it's like the worst age and the worst subject to teach.
Yeah.
I really like a challenge, apparently.
Well, you guys are now engaged and you know, you're both really successful in so many ways, doing very well, very courageous, telling your story. But how do you feel now in terms of where your own future is at? Because given the election of Donald Trump and the laws that he's tried to enforce and repeal, and the purgatory that DACA seems to be permanently in, what about your marriage? What about your future? What about having kids here in the United States? Is every day kind of on hold? Can you plan? How do you feel, Tania?
It's sort of like going back to the beginning, right? When we were completely undocumented. I mean, right now we have DACA, so there's some level of protection, but when you're completely undocumented, it's hard to plan for anything. And that's definitely where we're at right now. I mean, the Supreme Court could make a decision at any moment. COVID-19 is sort of, holding everyone in their homes. We had to postpone our wedding, and it seems like such a small, trivial thing compared to everything that's happening in the world and everything that we're used to sort of facing as undocumented people. But still, it was going to be a celebration of our love, and we are two undocumented people, and a wedding for us was going to be, almost like a community organizing event.
Yeah, I'm sure. I would imagine that wedding's got to have some pretty interesting, noble, thoughtful people at it, given your stories. So what is the pandemic? What does COVID-19 lay bare about folks in your category, in your status? Because it would seem that there are so many, quote, essential workers that are also either undocumented or DACA recipients. And without those folks, we'd be in a lot worse shape in terms of literally getting food and getting health care. So what are the specifics that this pandemic has laid bare about your community and the importance of it?
Well, I think what's crazy about this thing is that there's a dichotomy where the country acts like we're economic parasites, right? Before COVID, during COVID, after COVID, they think that we are just like sucking money and finances and just like taking up room in this country, when they don't realize just how much we contribute to this country. They don't put two and two together and realize, oh, the reason why I have this meat in front of me, these groceries in front of me, the reason why I'm able to go and take care of myself and the needs of my family is because there are immigrants putting their literal lives on the line for the sake of my well-being. And I would say that for those individuals, it's not like they have a choice. They don't have a choice as to whether or not they can go in and out. There is no unemployment. There is no stimulus check. And so in order to be able to provide for the sake of their family, they constantly have to risk endangering themselves and their elderly or anybody with an autoimmune disease who might be in their family, just so that they can take care of them. And it blows my mind that it's still something that we are still somehow demonized even throughout this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much more difficult for folks who don't have any access to any support system whatsoever. And the point that you made about, so many people think that undocumented people, especially undocumented people, are a drag on the system, when in fact they're actually contributing a lot more than they're taking out, according to study after study after study. But people prefer their stupid anecdotes over that and what they see. But, this is it's an interesting issue, the immigration issue, overwhelmingly in terms of politics, because there isn't actually a special interest that is against normalizing, or I should say immigration reform. There isn't one. The agriculture lobby is for immigration reform. The Chamber of Commerce is for immigration reform. Even religious institutions are for immigration reform, of course. So there isn't this one special interest. The thing to me, the only thing that is holding back immigration reform is straight up racism, xenophobia, and to a lesser extent, the fear of unknown, of what folks like yourselves bring in terms of culture. And that's my opinion. My long-winded opinion, I apologize, but that there isn't a special interest, that the only thing that stands between us and immigration reform is racism. Do you agree with that, Tania? Is there any special interest, do you think, that is spending a lot of money and getting certain politicians elected for any other reason?
I absolutely think it's racism. I think we face it every day, and it's hard, to get the country to sort of see us as people, as real human beings. And that's sort of what I talk about in my monologue, right? Is this need for people to really just connect with us. Like if you just listen to some people talk about their immigration status, you would realize we're just normal human beings, just trying to go through life the same as everyone else, right? And it's insane that with that fear and with that racism and this idea that because we're different, we're somehow the enemy. And it is worrisome, especially right now during the pandemic. I mean, in times of economic recession, the country tends to try to find that scapegoat, right? And immigrants are always the scapegoat. And that is not great for us, because then that means that, there's less chances of us moving forward. There's less chances and opportunities of us maybe one day becoming citizens or actually feeling like we're a part of this country where we even bought a house. I mean, we own a piece of this land, and yet we are not welcome here.
Both of you came here when you were little kids, and both of you have gotten an education here, an elite education, and both of you are contributing based on that education. Of course, Alejandro, you're teaching young people in Denver, and Tania, you're working at this theater, Modus Theater, and the Shoebox Stories podcast, and starting this nonprofit. You're people that we desperately want as examples of great Americans. It's so difficult and challenging to deal with the fact that there's still so much resistance against normalizing your status here. How do you see the future? What is the campaign and the activism look like? Is it just about getting politicians at the local, state, and of course national level elected so that they can pass some kind of legislation that would certainly benefit dreamers like yourselves, much less allow undocumented people to come out of the shadows and get work and get an education? What does it look like?
There's amazing policies that we would love to pass. I mean, there's the HEROES Act right now that just made it out of the House, but there's just, I mean, I hate to say it, but there's just minimal likelihood that anything will make it out of the Senate. And so for me in particular, and I obviously won't speak for the entire undocumented community, but I just want my family and all of our original dreamers to feel safe. And ultimately, whatever policy form that takes is what I want, right? Like I want my dad to be able to go out to work and for me to not have to call him and remind him of his rights so that he doesn't, if he gets pulled over by ICE, he doesn't get deported. I don't want to worry about every time my mom leaves, if she gets sick, like that she'll be able to access healthcare. Like I don't want to worry about us losing our home if we ever get deported. I don't want to bring a child into this world if I don't think they're going to be safe. Is
that a conversation that you two discuss about children and whether or not you'll have a child? Is that it is?
Yeah. I mean, we gotta be real about the situation. Like sure. We would love to have children at some point, but is it the safest time right now? Is it something that we want to rear our children in? That's something that we're definitely not sure of.
Yeah.
And then going back to the question that you had.
Yeah, what would you add?
I would add, other than like getting the right people elected, it's normalizing our stories. And I think that's why Shoebox Stories is so important, because you get people like John Lithgow and Jorge Ramos and Jose Andres and Maria Hinojosa to read our stories. And the reason why we have them read our stories is because we want our stories elevated. We want more people to be able to listen and realize like, hey, we are your neighbors. We are the people who are just like you, trying to survive in this capitalistic economy and also just thrive so that our future generations also have an opportunity, not necessarily have to have the conversation about whether or not we should even bring children into this world.
Very well said. Shoeboxstories.org. You can download the Undocumented podcast there, anywhere podcasts are available. Tania, Alejandro, thank you so much for telling your story here on my podcast, and I wish you both the best. If there's anything I can do, connect you with any people, and just stay connected with you in the future. It certainly helps to keep up to date with your story for people like myself. Thank you so much. You guys are extremely brave heroes and role models for so many other Americans. Thank you.
Can I add one last thing?
You can't.
All right.
I'm so sorry. I have to say no. You can't add one more thing. We're out of time. No, that's the great thing about the podcast. You know, podcasting is that it's like I don't have to go to a goddamn commercial break. I could do whatever I want. I have another thing in like half an hour. So whatever else you want to add. Yeah, go ahead, man. I'm sorry. Please. Okay. Sorry about that.
Just the fact we wanted to bring up the fact that DACA is on the cutting board right now, and we wanted to emphasize that whether or not we become undocumented again is happening very soon. And the truth of the matter is that once that happens, there's three options, right? They're either going to side with Trump and we will become undocumented. They're going to side in our favor, but then Trump will be trying to fight it. The third option is if it gets rejected one way or another, like Congress still has to make a decision about whether or not they're going to support individuals like us. So once it gets to that step, I would hope that people remember our short stories and hopefully are willing to dig deeper into the stories and narratives of other individuals that are just like us and are willing to go out and support and literally put their bodies, their words behind us.
Yeah.
Because we need them. We need all of you.
Yeah, we need more than just Facebook posts and kind of slacktivism. Folks like you are contributing more than most of us and having a much harder time doing it. And so we need to value your contributions and put our own reputations and voices on the line for you because your stories are, the height of injustice, what has happened to DACA recipients. And you make a point there of, classifying the difference in status DACA versus undocumented. You could be right now you have DACA protections, but you could lose those at any point, which allow you to work and go to school. Certain states have also taken risks in terms of allowing you, like yourself, to be a teacher in Colorado, like Alejandro. So different states have done different things, but the federal government can take all of that away apparently. So good luck to you. I'm glad that you said that one more thing. Super important point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon again, I hope.
Yes.
Thank you.
There you go, Alejandro and Tania, and check out shoeboxstories.org. Shoeboxstories.org. And listen to more of their stories there. It's a great podcast, and they are fascinating people. Thanks to my friend Chris Freites for letting me know about them. And I look forward to getting some more great guests from you, Chris. Thank you very much. If you have an idea for a guest to join me on the show to tell their story, if they're an expert on some policy or issue, I'd love to hear from you. So let me know who you'd like to hear. Okay, coming up now, my old friend John Donvan, who joins me as often as possible. I love this man. He is the moderator of Intelligence Squared Debates, which is a very important source for me for information to help me develop my ideas and opinions on the most important issues in the world. And he's been joining me for years. He's become a close personal friend of mine. He's on Twitter at John Donvan. Get his book In a Different Key that he co-authored and was a nominee for the Pulitzer Prize for that book. And they're making it into a documentary as well. So good, so important. And also, we have a bonus guest today because John's wife is a very respected physician at Georgetown University. And I got to talk with her about the president and his new drug that he is apparently taking. Do we really believe that he is taking it, by the way? Hydroxychloroquine. Anyway, I got to talk with his husband. Jesus, I've been drinking too much. I got to talk with John's wife, more importantly, physician, Dr. Ronit Mishori, about this issue and why it matters. Fascinating and very important conversation with her. John Donvan, Dr. Ronit Mishori, coming up right now. And here he is now from his beautiful home studio with all the Intel Squared paraphernalia. The great John Donvan. Looking good, buddy. I like that studio shot. Good stuff.
Thank you. It's just a corner of our house.
Yeah,
this is where my daughter finished her college classes, was sitting in this location as well.
Don't peel back the curtain, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Just a corner.
It's a home studio.
Looks like an Emmy to me up there. A lot of awards. You've won how many Emmys, John?
I've won 2 that I count and 2 other ones that I don't count.
Well, I don't understand. Do we not want to go into this?
I qualified for all of them, but it's a show to do in itself, but the News Emmy thing is a little bit of an illusion. There were 2 Emmys I won for work that I really am proud of, that I put in a great deal of effort, and I was honored to receive them. However, the News Emmy organization is actually a private organization, profit making, and one of the ways they make profits is by selling the statues to the winners. You have to pay for them.
What?
And so there's a little bit of a sort of Emmy inflation thing that goes on, where if you've worked on a broadcast, when a broadcast wins an award, the submitters are encouraged to name everybody who had anything to do with the broadcast,
right.
And they will all get awards,
right.
And all of them have to pay for the award. So it becomes thousands of dollars to buy the award for the people who were won.
Wow.
And so there were 2 instances in which I played a minor role, in my view, in a broadcast, and was listed as a credit. And so I got 2 Emmys for that. Then there were 2 Emmys where I really was completely the main guy. And also I don't buy the Emmys. I stopped doing that a while ago. So when I worked for ABC News full time, in the old days, they would pay for all of the Emmys for everybody. Then they stopped doing that, and then I stopped paying for them. So is that a clear answer?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know it was kind of a racket like that.
It's a little bit racket.
I don't like it. I don't like that at all.
Either.
I have a Peabody Award for warming up the audience at the Colbert Report. I wasn't sure if I earned it or not, but I think I did. I think that, every episode, every night for years. Yeah. Okay, I'll take it. But awards. Okay. Anyway, it's great to see you, as always. Great to talk to you. And how are you dealing? Are you're obviously working a lot. We've got a great debates to talk about for Intel Squared, but are you handling things well? Hanging in there?
I think I am. I think I really have no grounds to complain relative to the rest of the world, so I don't.
I hear that a lot from people, but I feel like your perspective is your perspective. So if you want to complain, you can complain. If you want to be happy, you're allowed to be happy. And then I'm
going to be happy for now.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the Electoral College. So this debate is out May 20th. Tonight, if you're listening on the 20th, when this podcast drops at 6 p.m., and you can go vote for it. But the premise of this debate is the Electoral College has outlived its usefulness. And you had 2 people on either side, which I think technically has got to be a challenge when you're doing it remotely. But do you feel like you lose anything at all technically?
Well, I'll say that this was a kind of banner moment for Intelligence Squared in 2 ways. And one is that, we normally do these things on a stage in front of a live audience. All the debaters can see each other. I can see them. I can see the audience. We get feedback from the audience. They laugh. They applaud. And we were doing this one digitally or remotely. Let me put it that way. And it worked. It actually worked. We put separate cameras in front of everybody. I had a separate camera. All 4 debaters had cameras in their homes, and we all recorded the debate locally. We communicated with each other. We could see each other through a Zoom-like platform, but the actual recording was on the cameras in each house, and then we all sent the files from our separate recordings together in, so it's very high quality.
Yeah.
And it was edited together to the debate that's going to appear in kind of a live moment at 6 p.m. on May 20th. And we're going live in that sense because we want people to have the experience that they have when they're in the audience, which is they get to vote. So at 6 p.m., you tune in, the debate begins, you go vote, then the debate ends, and then you have till midnight to vote the second time, and then we're going to announce a winner based on the difference between the first and second vote. So it worked. So that was kind of a big deal. And the other thing is, despite those obstacles to fluidity, it was one of the best debates we've ever had. I might rate it the best debate we've ever done on Intelligence Squared.
Wow.
We've done like 180 or so, something like that.
Well, that's kind of interesting to me, just because the premise of it, like, to me, this is, I feel so strongly about my opinion here that, in fact, yes, the Electoral College has outlived its usefulness. So interesting to hear you say that it was one of the best debates. I'm very much looking forward to this. But as it says on the website, and everybody should go to intelligencesquaredus.org, 5 American presidents, 2 in the last 20 years, have assumed office without winning the popular vote. The most recent is, of course, President Trump's election in 2016. Then, of course, you had Bush back in 2000. John, how is this a debate? Help me.
So there were two debaters who were basically on what I would say your side. They were arguing that the Electoral College makes no sense today because, number one, they're arguing we can find a way to have everybody's vote count towards a single candidate or two candidates, president and vice president. And they were referring to these 5 times in history where the popular vote went in a different direction from the Electoral College vote as misfires. They call them malfunctions and misfires. The other side really actually came back with an argument that was grappled with. It wasn't their opponents did not dismiss them because they presented it so well. The other side's argument, interestingly, was there are lots that the popular vote, the majority vote going to the person who wins the office is not necessarily always going to be the best way to determine victory, determine who should be chosen. And they cited lots of examples around the world where the person who gets the most votes ends up not being the leader. For example, in most parliamentary democracies, that's quite possible. Somebody might get the most votes, but they are not a majority, and then there has to be a negotiation about who's going to lead, and that it basically kind of works. And so they were making the argument, kind of that, surprisingly to me, that it really isn't a misfire. It's not that big a deal to have the popular vote and the Electoral College vote in conflict with each other. So that was a philosophical argument that they were making, which their opponents obviously disagreed with. But they were also saying that it would be kind of an impossible thing to have the popular vote function because we don't have a system for electing a single official nationally. Every election is run by states. It's how it's always been run by states. Right. And so they're saying that it would be incredibly difficult to control and to manage, and incredibly open to cheating, to stuff going wrong, that right now we're in a system where different states, because they run their own votes through the Electoral College, that different states have different rules, and that allows for experimentation, like mail-in voting, like choice rank voting, things like that. The different states right now, that we would be out of a world where experimentation could happen. So they were saying there was a kind of practical obstacle to having a single vote. That was very unpersuasive to their opponents. But what was interesting about the debate is that they made that case, they made it forcefully, and their opponents did grapple with it. It wasn't, oh, that's nonsense. They saw the merits each side saw the merits in the other side's arguments, which is kind of our ideal. So we like to have people arguing, not just saying, oh, that's nonsense, that's ridiculous, as we hear on cable news, but actually saying, okay, I see what you're saying, and here's the problem with that. And there was a really, really strong debate in that sense.
Well, it sounds, I mean, I'm really looking forward to watching this one, but it also seems that nothing is, regardless of this debate, is going to change anytime soon with the Electoral College, because you would need to amend the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken. And
you would, and that's never going to happen. But, there are, I think it's now up to 19 states plus the District of Columbia are working on an end run around the Electoral College. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I have talked about that before, but refresh our memory on that campaign.
I can't remember the exact name of the pact, but there's a kind of compact among...
I'm looking it up. It might be National Popular Vote or something. Go ahead.
Something like that. And so a number of states have gotten together and said, we will, because each state gets to make its own laws, what its electors do, we will give all of our electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. So they would be watching the popular vote and then retroactively deciding who their electors go to based on who wins the popular vote. And if enough states get together to reach 270 electoral votes, that would result in a sort of total permanent end run around the Electoral College, what people see as the problems with it, which are these, as some debaters call it, the misfire. So we're at a point now where the number of electoral votes that have been pulled together that way comes to about 195, 196. So, if a couple more big states would join that pact, then the Electoral College and the popular vote result would always be the same. And that's a kind of interesting.
Nationalpopularvote.com and everything you just said. Yeah, 196 electoral votes is accurate. Yeah.
So, no, there won't ever be. The Constitution will never be amended in this way. The other thing that was interesting about this debate is I asked the question, hey, By the way, I just want to go through who our debaters were. Jamel Bowie was a columnist from the New York Times. He was arguing that it's outlived its usefulness. He made a very, very interesting opening argument in which he looked at, like, why did they come up with the Electoral College in the first place? And he said the reasons that they came up with it were outdated within 20 years. And then they began tinkering with it because, so he made a very, very technical academic argument that it's outlived its usefulness. And his partner was Kate Shaw, who's a law professor and a consultant for ABC News. And against them was Bradley Smith. And Bradley Smith used to be the chair of the Federal Election Commission. So he really knew his stuff.
Yeah.
And his partner is Tara Ross, who has a big supporter of the Electoral College. The title of one of her many books is Why We Need the Electoral College. And what was really interesting is that at one point I asked Brad Smith, who was arguing for the continuation of the Electoral College and arguing that it's functional. I said, look, right now, aren't we in a situation where the way the Electoral College is playing out works to the interests of the Republican Party and it's working against the Democratic Party? And he said, he was very candid. He said, sure, actually right now that's true, but that wasn't always true. And then I turned to the other side who were basically arguing against it. And I say, isn't your argument, since you seem to be identifying with the Democratic Party, also self-serving? Let's get rid of the Electoral College because it's hurting Democratic votes. Both sides said, yeah, you can argue that these arguments being made from both sides are self-serving, but they both said, but let's take that out of it. Let's not make the argument being about Democrats versus Republicans right now. And that brought a kind of semblance, and I think reality of purity to the debate. They were both saying we would be making these arguments regardless of what its current impact would be on electoral outcomes.
Well, this is pretty much one of the most important issues in our country. The motion for this debate, the Electoral College, has outlived its usefulness. You can go and vote if you are listening to this on the day that it drops, May 20th, the podcast and the debate. And John Donvan, of course, the greatest debate moderator in the world. John, you have another debate that we wanted to quickly preview. Because I'm also going to get to talk to your wife today, right? You're going to tag out and allow me to talk to your wife, who's a physician and a very qualified, educated person to talk about a number of things, specifically the pandemic. But what's going on with the China debate, which is coming up? This is another really interesting and important issue.
I think this one is really fascinating. The more I've read into it in preparation, we're going to release this one on June 3rd, and the resolution is the coronavirus pandemic will alter the balance of power in China's favor. And that sounds very foreign policy-ish, and I suppose it is. But what we're really saying is that the United States has been, since World War II, the essential power, the leader, the go-to place, the figure out the problems, the put together coalitions, the problem-solving nation. You could always count on the United States to be the grown-up on the block. And now that may turn out to be China when we're through all of this, because China aspires to that role. China's been moving towards that role. China's been looking for weaknesses in the American position. And the argument's going to be made that the United States has ceded that role, had been doing so already by breaking treaties, by the White House disparaging alliances like NATO. This whole, we're talking about world order that's in the resolution, that this whole order is eroding, that had us in this kind of leadership role in its most ideal sense, representing sort of democracy, liberal democracy, rule of law, things like that, to be replaced by China. And China is not about democracy, and China is not about rule of law. And the question that we're going to debate is, given what's happened with coronavirus, where it's China that is sending aid to Europe, not the United States. The Chinese are the ones who have the manufacturing capacity for the things that everybody needs. The Chinese are the ones who are beginning to organize other nations. Let's get together and solve this as a group. They're doing that in Asia. That's not happening. The United States is not doing that. The argument's going to be that the way that the U.S. is handling this, and compared to the way China is handling this, is going to permanently alter that relationship, which was moving kind of in that direction anyway. And there's going to be pushback to that argument as well, that China continues to be crippled by its own by the way it shackles its own people democratically, by the way it cheats, that its own economy is at risk of slowing down for a lot of other reasons, including coronavirus. So there is going to be pushback, but I find it a fascinating issue because it kind of brings to a head the whole issue of America firstism that has been the dynamic of the White House since President Trump took over, and whether that's going to backfire, and is backfiring especially now because of coronavirus.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this one as well, because the difference between, China and pretty much every nation, powerful nation, and the U.S. is China, and the history of the U.S. is China is looking out for its own interests. And I would argue, if I were debating, and I would only last 10 seconds on this one, is that America first is not America first. It's just not. It's Trump first. It's him. It's not about America's interests. It's just about him. And as I was thinking about this one and talking with you today, what I was thinking was that what we are seeing so clearly, the mishandling of the pandemic in the United States, just the lack of preparation, the lack of concern, the lack of respect for science, is probably basically how the negotiations with China and every other issue have been handled. Completely disorganized, no leadership, and all about the man himself. So often that, in fact, he actually destroys his own interests within moments. He says he wants one thing, and then he goes out and says it's very confusing. And so leadership in America isn't about America first or America's interest, which it always has been. It's just about that guy. And we just don't see that with China and most other powerful countries. That's how I see it. I wish I could see it some other way, but that's how I see it. And now I'm done ranting.
Well, with China, it's about the Communist Party's leadership.
Sure.
And everything is done to serve that.
But it's not
so
one person.
That's the debate. I think it's going to be a good one. Yeah.
It's about that. Yeah, that Communist Party's leadership, and they certainly get a lot done. And as you mentioned, they make everything there, including, I think, the drugs, the antibiotics, and everything that's needed, most of them. So that's a really big concern that a lot of people have just realized. All right, well, both of these debates, everybody should go watch intelligencesquaredus.org. Follow John on Twitter at John Donvan and IQ2, right? Did I get it right this time?
IQ2US.org.
I just can't prepare, apparently, for this. Okay, are we going to tag you out and get your physician wife in here?
My wife, Dr. Ronit Mishori. I will go get her.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much. This is very cool. We get to do this. Yay! Yay!
Good morning.
I am so excited to talk to you finally and to meet you, at least virtually this way. We are lucky to have you joining us. She's a professor of family medicine at Georgetown University School of Medicine. She is an expert on a wide range of issues from global health to global human development, health disparities, human rights, family medicine, and she speaks like 94 languages. We're very excited to have 91. John Donvan's much better half, Dr. Ronit Mishori. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Mishori, yes.
Thank you.
It's almost there.
Thank you very much for joining me.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I've heard so much about you.
Well, lots to talk about that I could talk with you about, but we wanted to specifically talk about this drug that the president of the United States apparently says he is now taking, HydroxyChlorine. I can't even pronounce it, but he can, and so I feel inept. Why don't we start there? How concerned are you about that drug?
What's up with that? I thought that story was dead about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is not the first time that he's mentioned it, but since the last time he spoke about it, which maybe it was about 3 to 4 weeks ago, we got even more information about this drug, and it helps us know that this drug really is completely useless. It's being studied in the context of patients who are in the hospital, but at this point, there is absolutely no evidence that it does anything to help people who have the disease, let alone to prevent it, which is supposedly what he's taking it for. So it's a big mystery why he's brought it up again, from a scientific perspective. Even 4 weeks ago, when I wrote about this for a blog post, and I looked at the evidence, and back about three to 4 weeks ago, there were about 5 studies that looked at this drug and its effectiveness in treating COVID-19. 2 of the 5 were studies in cell cultures, meaning not even in humans. They were in basically studies in a dish. 3 other studies were so poorly done and so preliminary and so using a very, very small number of people and not using the most rigorous research protocols and methodologies that every self-respecting scientist said at the time that, what's the point of using it outside of clinical trials and perhaps as sort of the last resort if there's nothing else for somebody who's in the ICU and there's nothing more we can do about it.
Doesn't it work to prevent someone from contracting malaria?
It has some efficacy in malaria, and it's being used commonly for people with autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, and it helps in those people. But even studies looking at people who have these diseases and who have taken it versus people who haven't taken it to see whether the group that's been taking it for years is less susceptible to COVID-19 have not shown that they are less susceptible. And also the other thing I wanted to mention is since those early studies, we've had much bigger studies. Most importantly, the study at the VA system, which showed that not only was it not helpful, it actually potentially caused the deaths of more people than helped cure them. So I don't understand what's happening, why he's suddenly taking it. I don't understand what his doctor is allowing this. I mean, I've had with my own patients, I've had people call and ask me, should I use it? Can I use it? My cousin uses it for rheumatoid arthritis. Can I? And we've had this conversation about the evidence or lack thereof. And so, I can understand him doing crazy stuff and not following the science, not following the evidence. This is not the first time. But for his doctor, I mean, how can you allow something like that? Yeah,
I have a lot of suspicions as to why he would want to do this. I mean, generally just thinking that he just wants to throw out a drug name to, as some kind of a solution because he doesn't have one. But doctors don't prescribe drugs that way. HydroxyChloroquine is not something that any doctor really anywhere is necessarily prescribing right now. And how weird is it for you? I mean, I guess this is now a very American thing because of all the pharmaceutical ads for a patient to come and ask you about a drug. Usually I would think that, the doctor's responsibility is to tell us about the range of treatment, specifically the drugs we can take, as opposed to the patient coming into you and say, how about this one?
Well, that's actually happening a lot, especially with erectile dysfunction medications, because it's all about what you see and the direct-to-consumer.
Ask your doctor about this. Yeah,
exactly.
And they spend more money on those ED stuff than anything else, it seems.
Right, and it's so there's a whole range of direct-to-consumer drugs, and so we get asked about it all the time. But rarely do we get asked about, the president said I should do this. So it's kind of funny and awkward to say, well, I'm sorry, but you really should listen to this president. And, this is not the first time that he is avoiding listening to the experts and disregarding science and evidence-based medicine, or any evidence for that matter. So it's not surprising. What's surprising is why now. I don't know that I have the answer. Who knows? But it's very awkward and potentially harmful because people do listen to him, unfortunately. And we can see people, I can anticipate that people will start taking it again unnecessarily and not for any good scientific reasons. And as you know, also, Pete, there are very serious side effects potentially with this drug. And most importantly, there's a type of arrhythmia or irregular heart rate that is caused by this drug, and that can kill you. And there have been multiple reports of people dying and having serious cardiac side effects.
So what is the conversation amongst physicians? Do you guys have a chat group somewhere where you are talking about this drug or any other drug? Because the idea that the President of the United States is selling anything, saying anything, especially with his cult-like following, is crazy and dangerous and scary. But I also think that if a patient, you can't just go and buy this drug at the drugstore. You have to get a prescription for. What doctor would give a prescription for this drug? Can people actually get hydroxychloroquine from their physician, much less their pharmacy?
Well, I think some people probably would give them a prescription. I had a patient who called me and said, I'm going to Africa soon. I need an anti-malaria drug. And I said, you're going to Africa now where nobody's flying anywhere? Excuse me? She said, no, it's in a few months. Well, we need this medication now. And it just sounded very fishy to me.
Yeah.
So But, it's hard to get these medications. There's a shortage because there are people who actually need it. So any responsible physician and pharmacist will not dispense this drug.
Oh, that's the important point, because this drug is, as you mentioned, effective for other things. And so when you are repurposing it for something that's not effective for, it can even kill you. That's the height of irresponsibility.
Absolutely. And I've had patients who have lupus, who have rheumatoid arthritis, who said to me, I can't get my drug. I need a letter. I mean, it's ridiculous. I've been prescribing this drug for these people for 15, 20 years, and now they need a letter to the pharmacist that they actually need this drug, which delays their ability to obtain the drug. And it just puts more, it creates more barriers and challenges for people who actually need the drug. It's insane.
I guess this last question here is probably way beyond your scope, but the idea that a physician or that the president of the United States would come out and say he's taking a drug, a lot of people are suspicious as to whether or not he's actually taking the drug. And his doctor put out, I think, a weird statement. I didn't read it. But I don't know what the legality of this is. If the president says I'm taking a drug, can't you just go ask the doctor and be like, did you prescribe this? This is the president of the United States. Are you giving this drug to the president? What do you think about the ethics of that?
Either way, it's problematic. If he's taking a drug that has been actively discouraged for use by the FDA, by the NIH, by WHO, by every single public health and medical expert.
All of those are fake organizations. None of them are.
So there's a problem if he's taking it, despite all of the evidence. If he just is saying that he's taking it and is not really taking it, that's also problematic. So regardless of how you look at it, it's incredibly problematic. This is a person who needs to be a role model. He is the only thing he's role modeling is disregarding science, disregarding the experts, not listening to the evidence.
Well, far too late for him to be a role model. I would have said that in 2002. When I was on The Apprentice. But you're absolutely right. A president should be role modeling, and he is not. Okay, well, thank you very much, Doctor, for joining me to talk about this. But the bottom line is you would tell listeners, do not take this drug.
Do not take this drug unless you have this diseases that are where this drug is indicated for, or you are in the ICU and you're in a clinical trial and this is the last resort drug.
Yeah, or go in and ask your physician about it and then show him a picture of Donald Trump and see how he feels about that picture and then decide based on his reaction.
I don't want to imagine what would happen in that room at that moment.
Or her reaction. Thank you very much for talking to me. I look forward to talking to you more about these issues. And you can bump your husband, John Donvan, out of that seat anytime.
All right.
Thank you.
A lot.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, that's it. There you go. Dr. Ronit Mishori, and of course, John Donvan, Alejandro, and Tania earlier, and all of you. Thank you to Zach Lewis for a great bottle of whiskey and a great chat last night. Zach, I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you who are listening right now to my voice, talking into this microphone and supporting this podcast, especially with a paid subscription. If you aren't, check it out in the paid subscription link in the show notes, or go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic. And follow me on Twitter @Pete Dominic, on Instagram, on Facebook for more ideas. Share with me at any of those places. Email me standupwithpete@gmail.com. Okay, who else would you like to hear on the show? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And just know that no matter what, you're not alone. I mean, you literally can DM me. You can email me and be like, hey, I'm feeling down, because I know I can do that with you. We've built a community here of amazing people, and I love to hear from you. I'm sorry if I haven't gotten back to you. I'm doing my best to catch up with all these amazing messages from amazing people. So keep it coming and tell your friends about the show. Spread the word. Thank you for listening. I'm out. We'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up.